Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. The Brazilian variant of COVID-19 is dominant in Trinidad and Tobago. This story takes the lead in our 1129th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Wednesday, 9th June 2021. Details after this break.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. The P1 or Brazilian variant is now the dominant strain of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago, but the vaccines are working. That's a conclusion from the University of the West Indies, which is tasked with genomic sequences to test for the variant strains in the population. Here is TV6's Alicia Boucher with more in this report.
16 lineages of SARS-CoV-2 have been detected so far in the country, with 2 variants of concern being among them. The UK B117 variant, now called the Alpha variant, and the P1 Brazilian variant, now called the Gamma variant. So far, 521 samples have been submitted to UE for genomic sequencing. Professor of Molecular Genetics and Virology at UE, Dr. Christine Carrington, says the COVID-19 landscape has changed as it relates to the strains in the population.
Since August last year, there have been 3 dominant lineages in Trinidad. We have B in turquoise there, we have B1.111, which was most prevalent around August. It is not a variant of concern, and that one we don't see very much of that anymore. Then it was largely replaced by R1, shown in red, which we first detected in cases from about February, and it's also not a variant of concern. And then in April, we had P1 emerging, and that's shown in yellow. P1 now accounts for about 38% of all the sequences that we have generated since December.
However, with the circulation of the other 2 strains decreasing from the more recent samples taken, Dr. Carrington indicates that the P1 variant has grown exponentially. She says this can be expected based on the trend seen of this strain in other countries.
You see the yellow section, that's the proportion of P1 samples. And you can see that it's increasing over time. So it is at the last bar, I think was the 11th of that week, with 11th of May. And you can see that it accounts for 90% of what is out there. So, it accounts for 90%, I should say, of the sequences from the samples that we get. As I said, these samples are they're not all random samples, so we can't sort of extrapolate directly from this to the population. But I think we can be pretty certain that it has expanded, and it is the dominant strain right now.
In the East African country of Seychelles, which has the South African variant in circulation, Sinopharm and AstraZeneca were used to vaccinate a target population. Dr. Carrington says, based on the data emanating from their COVID-19 surge, the vaccines we do have in TNT should provide a measure of protection against the P1 variants.
So, in the Seychelles, although they saw infections in some vaccinated people, 80% of the people who were hospitalized were unvaccinated people. And there were 0 deaths among vaccinated people. So the vaccines work. And experimental data has shown that P1 is not as resistant to vaccines as B.1.351. So we can reasonably expect the Sinopharm to perform as well against the P1.
TNT is set to receive the 1-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine in August, and Dr. Carrington says it is similar to AstraZeneca and should have the similar effect in providing protection against different variants. Alicia Boucher, TV6 News.
As vaccination continues globally, the World Health Organization reports decreased infections and deaths due to COVID. But the organization warns, while vaccination is key, it's not absolute. Urvashitawari Rupnarayan of TV6 News has that story.
In the global context, the overall number of daily coronavirus cases has trended downward over the past 6 weeks and deaths over the past 5. Despite this, experiences by individual territories and regions are varied and at times divergent.
Increasingly, we see a two-track pandemic. Many countries still face an extremely dangerous situation, while some of those with the highest vaccination rates are starting to talk about ending restrictions. In countries with the greatest access to vaccines, we're seeing a decline in mortality among older age groups.
Deaths increased in 3 of the WHO's 6 regions, the Africas, the Americas, and the Western Pacific. Trinidad and Tobago falls within the Americas and was 3 weeks ago spotlighted by the Pan American Health Organization for increased COVID infection rates. The countries where numbers are trending downward are those with accelerated vaccination. Studies show almost 85% of the COVID-19 vaccine doses administered were done in high-income and upper-middle-income countries. Poorer countries have accessed a mere 0.4%. But these experts warn vaccination does not absolutely prevent infection and therefore is not the absolute cure to the COVID pandemic.
Vaccines and vaccination is one part of the solution. So this is an incredibly powerful tool that we have added to our repertoire of being able to deal with this pandemic. But the other measures need to be carried out as well.
It will take time, the WHO says, to administer vaccines throughout entire populations. It will take more time for persons to get their second jab, and another 2 weeks into that person's system to have maximum effect.
While these vaccines do reduce the chances of infection, they are not 100%. And so even if you've had 2 vaccines and you are protected from getting severe disease or ending up in the hospital, you might not be protected from getting the infection and passing it on to others. And there is a tendency, or there's a natural tendency for people to think once they've had the vaccine that, they are protected, and there is a tendency to drop your guard and to stop taking all the measures like the mask wearing and the distancing that one would have done otherwise.
And that's why lifting restrictions too quickly can have disastrous effects.
When leaders are taking decisions about adjusting measures, they need to take into account many of these factors. The virus that is circulating, the amount of virus that is circulating, the capacities to be able to respond, which include the surveillance systems that are in place, the ability to rapidly detect cases, provide clinical care for cases, isolate cases so that they don't have the possibility to spread to others, to carry out contact tracing, to ensure that people who are in quarantine are supported, are able to do so that they, if they are infected, do not pass the virus to others.
From their mantra, no one is safe until everyone is safe, comes the WHO's call to not let your guard down just yet. Urvashitawari Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
In Jamaica, the University Hospital of the West Indies is conducting a study to probe mental illness in citizens who contracted and survived the COVID-19 virus.
This is an issue we have been exploring over the past few months. In fact, a recovering COVID patient told me she's been having sleepless nights and has been getting counseling.
I couldn't turn the light off. I still hear them pulling the thing. Talk in my sleep. Even now, sometimes I just start find myself trembling. Sometimes I still have shortness of breath. Sometimes my heart still races. But I'm doing a little counseling now.
Experts say 1 in 3 persons who contract COVID-19 suffers from mental illness. Here's what consultant psychiatrist Dr. Winston Delahaye told me.
Within that, the primary presentations included anxiety at about 17%, major depressive disorder at about 14%. There's one room study in Italy, where they found a 30% prevalence of post-traumatic stress disorder. In addition to this, though, I must point out what we call post-COVID psychosis. So this is where, just for simplicity, amongst other things, persons who otherwise had no history of mental illness, having had the COVID virus, whether inpatient or outpatient, now started having fears which could not be corroborated by their loved ones, hearing things, seeing things.
Now, this is why a local study is currently being done to get a true picture of the situation.
Antigua and Barbuda's Health Minister Sir Malwin Joseph welcomes vaccination turnout and accounts for the uptick on the special incentive offered by the government. Jessica Russell of ABS News reports.
Getting vaccinated against COVID-19 may save your life, but starting today, it may also make you a landowner.
Starting on Monday the 7th of June.
Last week, Cabinet announced an incentive for people to get a COVID-19 shot. If you get your first or second jab between today and the end of the month, you're automatically entered into a raffle to win 8,000 square feet of land in Judges Hill, valued at $65,000. Our team spoke to Health Minister Sir Malwin Joseph at the Multipurpose Cultural Center vaccination site on Monday.
I can see the difference immediately. A lot of young people are showing up for the vaccines. And I have to really conclude it might very well be as a result of the special incentive that was offered by the government.
We asked people lined up to get an Oxford AstraZeneca shot how they felt about the move.
A lot of people can't afford to get land in Antigua, you understand? And that is a good thing that the government did so that some people could earn a piece of land.
Once it's something to be had, people don't normally step back from it. And then you have those that are resolute not to deter them.
However, this woman says the office should have been for the first set of people who got vaccinated.
Well, that should be the first option in the first place.
The government has been getting creative in pushing people to get the jab as the turnout dwindled during the second phase of the vaccination program. Jessica Russell, ABS News.
It was smooth sailing as Barbados welcomed its first cruise ship, Celebrity Millennium, in about 15 months. Details in this Barbados Today online news item.
The cruise liner set sail from Phillipsburg, St. Martin on a 7-night itinerary with Barbados as its first port of call. It's the first cruise ship where 95% of its passengers and crew are fully vaccinated. Tourism Minister Senator Lisa Cummins, who was on hand to welcome the special guests, stressed that Barbados must be prepared to welcome tourists back to the island. She said today's call follows more than a year of discussions, including key players working through the America's Cruise Task Force. Minister Cummins now wants the task force to adopt a new mandate, which must include creating more opportunities for cruise players.
We have to have an opportunity where Adrian and Mr. Eastman, both of you and your respective taxi associations and the various tour operators have a meaningful opportunity to engage in carving out new niches and new businesses. We have to spread the pie and it has to be inclusive. But let us talk about what that means. There is not just advocacy. Advocacy is fine. Having conversations with partners is fine. Representation is fine. But we need meaningful business models.
Vice President of Destination Development at Royal Caribbean Group, Josh Carroll, said he's happy to be back in business.
Today is the first call to Barbados. It's actually the first cruise ship in the entire Western Hemisphere visiting any port. And that's historic. And it's also a testament to the trust, partnership. You know, in good partnerships, and I know some of my colleagues here will know, we don't always see eye to eye at every moment. But there's a sincere desire to find a way to get common ground. And ultimately, when you have a shared objective, you can find a way to get there, as we did.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.